1927, March the 11th, 1927. And Martin Luther King was born January the 15th, 1929. I was born in Sheridan, Wyoming, and Martin Luther King was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He in the south, and I in the north, in the west. Well, where Martin Luther King was born, there were 15 of these states that were a part of the Confederacy. And when a law was handed down in 1896 called Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court ruling said that there should be separate but equal, and that black people and white people should not be together. And in those 15 southern states, and one of the states where Martin Luther King was born and raised, in Georgia, he came under that kind of system that said everything that is to be a part of your life will be separate, but it wasn't equal. So black schools, there were black schools and there were white schools, and there were black communities and there were white communities. About the only time that they came in contact with one another was either through blacks having to work for white people or black people being abused by the justice system. The Ku Klux Klan and other kind of white racist groups, they were rampant. So when Martin Luther King was coming up in the South, this was the kind of threat that was always around in those 15 southern states. But that did not mean it was only, the Ku Klux Klan was only in the South. Because in Colorado, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan ran the state of Colorado. Did you know that? The governor was a Klansman. The mayor of Denver was a Klansman. And about 2/3 of the legislature in Colorado were members of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan used to march down 17th Street with all their, their robes and things. Regularly, once a week, they paraded up and down downtown Denver. They burnt crosses on the side of the hill in Golden, Table Mountain. So the Klan was just not confined to the South. The Klan was throughout the United States. And Colorado was designated as one of the areas where they wanted to really exercise the expansion of the Klan. There was a Klan that appeared in Wyoming also. My brother said when they would parade down the street in Sheridan, Wyoming, he said he recognized some of those men under the hoods because he knew how they walked. So when we talk about the South being the worst perpetrator of oppression to black people, you need to rethink this. This was throughout the United States. It just meant that the South had a mandate that they had to separate black people from white people. Of course, they had signs up that says white only or black only or those kind of things. When I was growing up in Sheridan, I only saw one sign in Sheridan. But this is during the time of the Great Depression, and everybody's poor for the most part. So you're not going to find the difficulty of trying to separate people because the government had a program called the New Deal, and the president, who was the president during the New Deal? Who was our president? Yes.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt?
That's correct, yeah, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He made a program that helped all the people. And because black people were part of that whole group, why we were able to get some of the benefits of the New Deal. Well, when I was going to school, I had gone to school in Sheridan, Wyoming, in Boulder, Colorado, and in Denver, Colorado. Martin Luther King, of course, was going to school at the same time in Atlanta, Georgia, to an all-black school. The schools I went to in Sheridan, in Boulder, and in Denver were schools that were not Jim Crow schools. No, there were black kids and there were white kids. In fact, I graduated from Manual High School in Denver. Manual High School at that time, at one point in Manual's history, was almost all black. But when I went to Manual High School, we had a diverse group of people. Although we were in a desegregated place, we were not integrated. We had students who were Mexican. Some of their ancestors were from the old Spanish ownership. Remember the Spanish Succession? We had kids who were Japanese because this is wartime, World War II that is, when Japanese were forced out of their homes out of California. So some of those students were at Manual High School with me. There were, of course, black kids, and then there were white kids. And many of the white kids that were at my high school were first-generation immigrants from Eastern Europe. They lived in Globeville, Colorado. And so this was the makeup of the school that I went to. The school that Martin Luther King went to was all black because law said that they had to have been separated. Well, when I graduated, incidentally, back to the business at Manual, because there was this setting of desegregation and there was no integration, black kids had their own prom, the Mexican kids had their own prom, the white kids had their own prom. We were not a cohesive group, to say the least. Although we were in class together. There were no black teachers. Never had a black teacher. And all Martin Luther King had was black teachers, because that was the law. And when I went to college, I went to the University of Denver. And once again, there were very few black people that were going to college at that time. I started at DU in 1944, and I graduated in 1948. World War II was going on when I first began college, and the same with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King went to a black college, and it's called the Historical Black Colleges. Many of these colleges that were in the South for black people came out of the Reconstruction period after the Civil War was over. So he went to an all-male college called Morehouse University. And Morehouse was one of the main colleges that produced a lot of the black leadership of those people who were foremost in the civil rights movement. Morehouse College. Well, when I graduated in 1948, I tried to get a job as a teacher in Denver Public Schools. And I felt really good that I was going to be able to get employed, because there was supposed to be a shortage of teachers at this time, and there was also people from Denver Public Schools were coming to recruit members out of my class and giving them contracts. So when I went to sign up to see if I could get a contract and be hired by Denver Public Schools, I was told I needed to get my experience somewhere else. Well, first they said, you need to get your experience. And I said, well, can I get it with you? No, we don't really have that kind of opportunity here yet. have to prove yourself somewhere else, I guess they say. So, since I didn't get employed in Denver, I had the option of going to a southern area, a southern state, an area where Jim Crow was in vogue, so that black people could teach black people. So I went to Kansas City, Kansas, and I had the experience that I had never experienced in my life.